All right, so this is part four in a long saga about my financial and career history, primarily at Volkswagen of America. And so June 1st, 2011, my wife and I up and moved to Germany. We lived in a town called Braunschweig, which is just south of Wolfsburg, which is 2 hours west of Berlin. Wolfsburg is world headquarters for Volkswagen, and Braunschweig is a kind of a college town, which is a little bit more of a traditional German city compared to Wolfsburg, which is like a very Volkswagen-esque city. Basically, that all the people there just work for Volkswagen, and it anyway. So culturally, we decided to live in Braunschweig, and basically, what I did in Germany, to make a really long, complicated story short, is basically the department that I worked for back in the United States. One of the things that we did was, and all the companies do this. I know this because I've worked with people from Ford, GM, Chrysler, Nissan, Honda, Toyota, all of them. Basically, what all the major manufacturers do is they monitor the warranty data. Okay, so if you own a vehicle that's under warranty and you take it to the dealer and they replace something, whether it's a spark plug or a radio or a brake pad, and the manufacturer, Ford, GM, Chrysler, whoever pays for it, it creates a statistic, and they're keeping track. Okay, how many brake pads have we replaced under warranty? How many spark plugs have we replaced under warranty? How many radios have we replaced under warranty? And then they have statisticians, people who are really good with stats, and they're monitoring those to look for trends. And it's more difficult than you'd think to filter out sort of the noise from the real issues. And they begin to monitor, and they'll say, okay, like we have 9 alternators already replaced on the 2013 Jetta Wagon 2.5 liter with automatic transmissions built between this month and this month. We need to start working on that. It looks like it's going to be big. And so basically we would scour the warranty data, identify topics, and then we would publish those topics to headquarters. And again, this is pretty much how all the manufacturers work. And then headquarters would assess the data and compare the data to other countries where those alternators are being used or that car is being used. And then they would direct that problem to different departments. So they might direct it to the factory that built the car. They might direct it to the electrical department because that alternator is used everywhere. They may direct it even to research and development because they might already know about that issue. And so when I moved to Germany, there was about something like 120 of these open topics. And it was just difficult to manage. There's a 6-hour time difference. There's a language barrier, and there's also a bureaucracy barrier. What I mean by that is at headquarters in Wolfsburg, you have about 65,000 people. You have about 20,000 people. No, I'm sorry, maybe 12,000 people working in research and development, and like 1,500 people working in quality assurance. And then you have all these factories that are building the cars. Back then, we had cars coming to the United States from probably 7 or 8 factories. And so just sort of playing like air traffic controller with all these problems and topics. And, there's a lot of things that are lost culturally. One simple example is, in Germany, it is illegal to go out in the morning, start your car, turn on the heat, go in and have your breakfast and let your engine warm up. It's illegal to do that because it's pollution. And so there were unique problems that we had in the United States that were culturally driven. Another example is that, like, if a German, drives to the soccer field to watch his son play soccer and it's raining, like he might sit in the car, but he wouldn't sit in the car with the car running with the AC on because it's, again, polluting. And so there was behavioral differences between the United States and the Germans, and there's geographical differences and fuel quality differences. And so problems often required sort of this emotional intelligence translation to help them understand how Americans use the radio or something like that. And anyway, so for 3 years, I lived in Germany, and the best way to describe it is I was basically functioning as an American ambassador to try and make sure that the issues we were having in America were known and addressed and prioritized and escalated and understood to a very wide group of people. And part of my role was presenting the most important and escalatable topics in front of management. So I would stand in front of maybe 50 people, including vice presidents and directors, and I would present auf Deutsch to explain what kind of problem we were having and where we were at in the analysis and who was doing what. And sometimes those things were extremely confrontational with yelling and cussing, and it's really scary. That was like my introduction to public speaking. And I basically, the very first time I did it, I basically just introduced myself in German. You know, I said, "My Name is James Rojek. Ich bin der Resident aus den USA." Now I need to speak in English, you know, and then by the end of my time, I was doing it all in German. And I even once presented to the worldwide head of quality, a guy named Mr. Tuch, Tuch. You can look him up. He used to be in charge of group quality at Volkswagen, and that was pretty terrifying, but also pretty exhilarating. While I was in Germany, I became a father to my son Peter, and what becoming a father had, the reason I mentioned becoming a father is because when I became a father, I began to realize to a heightened extent how precious time is. And I realized that I was not going to go back to college and miss all of that time with my son just to get a piece of paper. Because previously I'd been getting a piece of paper that basically said I knew how to work on cars. And it's like, I already know how to work on cars. And I decided that if I go back to school, I was going to go back to school to learn something new that I couldn't learn on my own, and that I didn't already know, and that I was truly interested in. And that was mechanical engineering. And so I made that decision while I was in Germany. And also while I was in Germany, I had sort of my first institutionalized educational achievement of my life. And that is I passed the German C1 certification with the Goethe Institute. So basically in Europe, they break up all of the languages into 6 sections: A1, A2, B1, B2, C1, C2. And I passed the C1 certification, so the second highest certification after 3 years of German. Because when we got to Germany, I didn't speak any German. I couldn't say, I need a rental car, or I'd like a coffee. All I knew how to say was like, hola and adios, and that wasn't right. So that was a major academic achievement for me. And I'm so grateful to my German teacher, Anja Stuver, who led me down that road and was an incredible teacher. Anja, if you're ever watching this someday, I love you too, and I miss you. Yeah, so basically, at the end of my time in Germany, my old boss, Fred, called me, and he said, hey, what are you doing at the end of your assignment? And I said, yeah, I'm going back to Auburn Hills. I'm going to do something there. And he said, are you excited about that? I said, no, not really. And there's really nothing in Auburn Hills that I was excited about. And he said, well, I have a job opening coming up here in Chattanooga. I'd like you to come work for me again. I think it'd be a good fit. And he told me about the job. It was working in quality analysis. And I was like, Fred, I'm not moving to the South. I'm not moving to Chattanooga. Like, I want to stay in Germany, actually, but they can't get it to work. That's a whole nother story. Doesn't matter. But I was like, I'm going back to Michigan. That's where my family is. That's where my friends are, And he's like, okay, well, give it a couple weeks, think about it. I'll let you know when the job posts, and I'd like you to think about it. And so I hung up the phone, and I was laughing because over the years, Fred had kept saying like, I'm going to get you to come work in the factory. And I kind of always said no. So I hung up the phone. My wife asked me, hey, who is that? I said, Fred. And she said, what was that about? And I said, oh, there's this job in quality assurance. And she said, tell me about the job. And I told her about the job. And she said, oh, the job sounds really interesting. I said, yeah, the job sounds awesome, but I'm not moving the family to Chattanooga. And my brilliant wife, she just said, why not? And it was like, yeah, why not? Like, why am I against this so much? Like, why won't I even consider it? And we'd never been to Chattanooga, didn't really know anything about it. And so we Googled it, and kind of ironically, we found 2 things. Basically, keep a long story short, basically Chattanooga, basically some of the latest articles on Chattanooga was basically said Chattanooga is full of Christians and Chattanooga is full of outdoorsy people. And those are 2 things that we are and were. And we said like, okay, well, that sounds pretty good. So I decided to go for the interview. I interviewed with the vice president of quality assurance. The guy absolutely kicked my butt. Andreas Linke is his name. He's back in Germany now. I mean, he just beat me over the head in that interview. I almost came out crying. And it was in person in Germany, but the guy who would become my real boss, Fred, who'd been my boss, he was on the phone on mute. And after the interview, I mean, I was almost in tears. I felt so beat up. And Fred calls and he's laughing at me. He's like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad that phones have mute because I was laughing so hard. And I was like, that wasn't funny, Fred. That was awful. You just wiped the floor with me. And he's like, no, it was good. It was good. And he goes, I talked to him already. And I was like, really? You talked to him? He goes, yeah, he likes you. He's like, he thought you did great. Oh my gosh. So there's some encouragement for you. If you feel like you bombed an interview, sometimes the people doing the interviewing, they just want to find your limit. They want to push you until you break. And they don't care that you broke because everyone breaks. They just want to know at what point you break. And so if you last the full hour before you break, you may feel bad because you broke, but they might be really happy that you lasted the hour. So so we stayed in Germany for 3 years. And I'm a little reluctant to share this piece of information because of a Bible verse that says, when you give, don't let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. There's another Bible verse, Hebrews 10:24, that says, stir up one another with good works. And one of the ways that we stir up one another is by sharing testimonies. And so I want to share something because it's specifically related to my financial life. And it's true, and it's odd. And so I've reckoned with occasionally sharing this. And I've normally only shared it with like one person, not you two. But so it's also quite personal. So there is a particular sin that I've struggled with my whole life, lust. And I had been really defeated for a season of life while I was in Germany with this sin. And I was on my way home from Volkswagen and I was praying, and I was just really intensely crying out to God. And I just said, like, what am I supposed to do with this sin? It's plagued me. It's defeated me. Like, just tell me what to do. I don't care what it is. Anything, I'll do it. Just what is the next step? And I very clearly and quickly came to mind the story of the rich young ruler who came to Jesus and basically said, what must I do to have eternal life? And Jesus said, keep all the commandments. And he said, I've already done that. And he said, one thing you lack, sell everything you have and give your money to the poor. And this story is actually more about my wife than it's about me. And I mean that as a compliment, which you'll see in a moment. So I came home to our apartment in Germany, and I told my wife, Michelle, I said, hey, she knew about this sin. She knows about this sin. That's not to say either of us have any acceptance for it, only that it's not a secret. And I said, here's what happened today. And basically I want to sell everything we have and give it away so much as we can. We have a child, we have rent to pay, but how can we do that as radically as possible? And to my amazement and to her credit, and this is why I say this story is more about her than me, she immediately said, yeah, let's do it. And I just want to say, I've said this to her, of course, many times, like, she didn't hear from God. I mean, all she did was hear from me that I wanted to give away, all of our money. And she just immediately was on board. And that's just an absolutely staggering thing. So we basically liquidated all of our accounts, we didn't own cars at the time because we were in Germany. We didn't have a house, and we didn't literally sell trinkets and clothing and furniture, but we basically gave away all of the money that we had on hand, except for the money that was locked in a 401k that was inaccessible. We actually dumped we basically withdrew everything out of our Roths, IRAs, which came with penalties that we paid. And we ended up giving $65,000 away to charity, most of which went to Samaritan's Purse. And here's why I mention this. First of all, it's true. Second of all, it's a significant part of my story. Third of all, there's nothing admirable about retiring early by being greedy and being a miser and being selfish. I don't think there's anything admirable about that. And my goal in telling you this story is not to say that I've never been greedy or I've never been selfish or I've never been a miser. I only want to tell you that laced within my story of having a good job at a young age that I didn't deserve, getting good bonuses from a good company, making good decisions and being a good steward and saving a lot, laced within that story is also several chapters of, I think, rare generosity. And that generosity really was acts of obedience. And I skipped over it, but I basically, when I was about 16 and again when I was 18, I had similar experiences where I felt like the Lord was telling me to dump what I had. And I gave away in high school, I gave away, I think it was $650. That was basically all the money I had. And just before I started working at Volkswagen, I gave away $1,500. That was like all that I had. And I don't say that for anyone's praise or accolades. And I say that quite reservedly because I know what the Bible says about giving and giving in secret. And if you give publicly, you've received your reward. And so my desire is not to receive any kind of rewards. But my story is incomplete if those significant financial aspects to my story aren't also told. And so from a desire to tell the whole story, which I think all of which gives glory back to God for his generosity, I feel compelled to include that. So anyway, so in June 2014, with much reluctance because we wanted to stay in Germany longer and we were not ready to go, we moved from Braunschweig, Germany, world headquarters for Volkswagen, to the relatively newly opened factory in Chattanooga. And at that time, I think I was making right around $70,000 a year. So I was 25. And there's another video on my channel under the early on where I actually show a spreadsheet of all the money that I made over the years at Volkswagen. So you can see the exact amounts, how much I made per year, because Volkswagen also pays bonuses like most big companies. And so if you want those details, you can find that video. Yeah, and that's my stint in Germany. And so now I'll tell you about the factory and then retirement.